Good morning, Blendville friends and family. I'm here at Ozark Christian College with my friend, mentor, colleague, Matt Stafford. And the reason we're here is because in this next year, well, actually today, we're starting a new series that we're going through the book of the Psalms. We're going through the whole Psalms in a year, 365 days in the Psalms. And so, uh, Matt, you are a professor of the Psalms here at Ozark, correct?
That's right. I've taught the Psalms for about 12 years now. And as a worship leader, campus minister, college professor, I have thrived on the Psalms both personally and then corporately in leading worship. I rely on the Psalms pretty heavily for planning and leading worship.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, I do too as well with that being a worship leader. So totally get that. So you're kind of our resident expert, as I would like to think, and so that's the reason why we're here talking to you. So just kind of as an intro, so like after all these years, what keeps you coming back to the Psalms?
I think I was captivated by the Psalms when I was a student, when I uh, realized that if I wanted to be a better worshiper, a better praying person, that I could learn from them, that they were the examples of prayer. Um, Jesus, when he was asked by his disciples to teach us to pray, he responded by saying, "When you pray, say, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name." And he taught us the model prayer. He gave us the exact words to pray, and it dawned on me that, well, that's what we have in the book of Psalms. We have 150 prayers that give us the words to pray, to sing, and to relate to God. And those have remained timeless. I'm just astounded that these prayers that are, as much as 3,000 years old are so relevant today. I pray the Psalms every day, and I see real world events, including pandemics and political upheaval. It's all there in the Psalms, and so they've maintained an amazing relevancy for being 3,000-year-old Hebrew poetry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where do we even begin with the Psalms? I mean, there's so many of them. I mean, I'm sure it's a very daunting book for a lot of people. As they open it up, they see all these, these Psalms, and they're like, "Where do I even begin? Where do I
Yeah.
start?" So, how do we read them? How do we begin to read them? How do we even digest them and make them a part of our lives?
Yeah, it can be daunting. There are 150. It's the longest book of the Bible by far. So I would say take it slow. There's no race. There's no urgency. Rather take it slow and chew it. Like my parents taught me, chew your food 32 times before you swallow. The same thing is true of Scripture. Just take it slow. It's not a race. And as far as the Psalms go, they are somewhat all over the place. And you'll read one psalm after another, and you'll go from highs to lows, rather dramatically. But that's what life is. Life can come at you pretty fast, and things can be flipped upside down on a dime. And so the Psalms really mirror real world life in that way. As far as suggestions for getting the most out of them, I would say, and along the lines of slowing down, and that is reflecting on each verse at a time, taking it slow. In Hebrew poetry, we have typically two lines, and this is called parallelism. So we have two lines that correspond to one another, and the second line is usually similar, but sometimes opposite. There's different types of parallelism, but the point is it slows us down and asks the question, what is different about these two lines? What is where is the second line taking me that the first line leads me to? Where's it going next? And it slows us down, gives us a chance to really reflect on the meaning. And the second thing you find in the Psalms, in addition to parallelism, is a lot of metaphoric language that also allows us to kind of run with our imaginations and apply the Psalms to ourselves. So, for example, a frequent metaphor is that God is our rock.
Mm.
God is my rock. And a metaphor is like God is a rock, but also he's not a rock, right? He's not literally a rock. But we start thinking about a literal rock and what is that all about, and how does God um, how is God similar to that? So, for example, rocks are old. They're as old as the hills. So they've been around a long time. They're stable. They don't move. They're bigger than us. We can climb on top of a rock and we can see great distances. So all of these things are different ways of thinking about God. It's all perfectly natural. That's what the metaphor is designed for us to do, to engage our imagination. So parallelism, metaphor. I think the third thing I would say would be to pray them with emotion. And for me, it helps if I pray them out loud, because when I'm praying silently, I can't quite put the emotion in it. But when I'm praying out loud, I can change the tone of my voice and the pace, and I find that when I get a little dramatic with the Psalms, they connect at a deeper level with me.
Yeah. So the next question I had was just, some devotional practices. You've kind of given us a few things to think through as we're digesting the Psalms, but have there been things that you've done with your students or things personally that you've done over the years that have really helped you just make the Psalms a part of who you are?
Well, I'm a journaler for decades now. I respond to God and Scripture by writing. So if that's how you are, then go for it. Do it. I write a couple hundred words a day as a reflection to the Psalms. And so that's one thing. Or maybe you're more of a verbal person and you could even record. Nowadays, it's pretty easy to just record a little video of your response or an audio. So I think responding is really important in some way. Another practice would be to memorize the Psalms. And by that, I don't suggest you're going to memorize all 150, but start small, memorize a verse, memorize a couple verses. But I would really encourage you to memorize an entire Psalm. And again, there's some Psalms that are 5, 6, 8 verses. So it's not that big of a deal, but there's something about being able to, in the moment, pray an entire prayer, just like, we've all memorized the Lord's Prayer. And I think many of the Psalms ought to be the same for us. So memorizing them, which requires repetition and verbalizing them. So those have been the biggest three for me: journaling, engaging with them, and memorizing them.
Well, one of the resources that we're going to be using throughout this series is Tim Keller and his wife. They created a devotional that goes through all the Psalms in a year. And so I'll provide a link for that where you can pick that up and use that. I will post the scripture each day that we'll be going through. Actually, I'll probably put at the beginning of the week what we're going to be covering throughout the week, so that way you know ahead of time. But that way we all have the same thing that we're going through. We can engage each other in our online platform here, and just really help make the Psalms a part of our lives, especially after such a crazy year. I mean, this is going to be, I think, just a very refreshing and enjoyable thing for us. So aside from that resource, is there any other resources that you've used over the years, Matt? Or I know you have a website, so I'd like to plug that at some point as well.
Yeah, I've got a website that has my favorite books on the Psalms, so I won't talk about them here. You can go there and read that. But yeah, about a year ago, I decided to put everything I've ever written or recorded on the Psalms out there for anyone to engage with. So it's the address is mattstaffordpsalms.com. And when you go there, you'll find all 150 Psalms. And I've got a picture for each one of them. So here's that idea of metaphor: is it helps me to have a memory hook for every Psalm. So I have a picture that is of a dominant metaphor that is in that Psalm. So that helps me remember them. So you can engage with that. If you go through and you find a picture that's interesting, click on that and it will take you to that Psalm. It'll have a YouTube video of some teaching, and it'll also have a devotional commentary that would be an example of the kind of journaling that I do every day in the Psalms. I also link to songs. As a worship leader, I want people to connect the Psalms to modern worship music or hymns. And so many of those are there as well, YouTube videos and other articles and things that I've written.
Yeah. And some of those songs you've even put together yourself, right?
Yeah, I've written a few Psalms myself.
Very cool. Very nice. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today, Matt, and just really kicking off the series for us. It's really appreciated.
Thanks. And my best to you as you begin this journey this year. I know you're going to be blessed by spending time in the Psalms this year.